My friends, healing rarely arrives with fireworks. It does not announce itself in grand ways. It moves quietly, like dawn seeping through a darkened room. Slowly, gently, persistently. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And perhaps that is why healing feels so invisible, because it is not the absence of pain, but the transformation of it. Maybe you think you're still broken because the light isn't blinding yet. But sometimes healing begins the moment you stop trying to return to who you were before the pain and start becoming who you were always meant to be after it. You see, the world often teaches us to measure progress by what we can show. Smiles, productivity, optimism. But Jung understood something deeper, that healing is an inner process, where what is unseen carries more weight than what is visible. It happens beneath the surface, in the silence, in the pauses, in the spaces where you simply breathe and survive another day. So let's explore the 6 signs that you've healed more than you realize. Not the loud healing, but the kind only the soul can recognize. Sign 1. You no longer chase. Closure. Once, you needed answers to everything. You replayed conversations until your mind was bruised from overthinking. You wanted explanations, why they left, why life changed, why the story ended the way it did. But something in you grew tired of the chase. You realized closure doesn't come from others. It comes from within. It's not a neatly tied ending. It's the quiet decision to stop bleeding for what no longer exists. Jung believed that every person we meet represents a piece of ourselves we must face. When those people leave, they take the lessons with them. And that is your closure. You don't need their apology, their recognition, or their return. Healing begins the moment you accept that the story ended exactly as it was meant to. That some people were never meant to understand you, only to awaken you. And when you can finally walk away without resentment, when you stop checking the door, hoping they might come back, you've already healed more than you think. And sign 2. You no longer need to be understood. There was a time when being misunderstood burned. You wanted to be seen for who you are, to be validated, to be recognized. But healing whispers a different truth. Not everyone is meant to see your depth, and that's okay. Jung taught that what people see in you often mirrors what they refuse to face in themselves. When they judge your sensitivity, it's because they fear their own. When they mock your depth, it's because they are drowning in the shallow. The moment you stop seeking to be understood, you reclaim your power. You realize your worth was never meant to be proven. It simply is. You've healed when you can listen to someone misjudge your heart and still stay calm, because you no longer need their perception to define your peace. That's what real inner strength looks like. Silent, steady, self-knowing. Sign 3. You stop romanticizing the past. You used to live in the echo of what was. Old songs, old messages, old memories that replayed like ghosts in your mind. You kept wondering if things could have gone differently, if you could have saved what broke. But healing changed your vision. You stopped seeing the past as something to return to, and started seeing it as something that taught you. You learned to look back without yearning, only with understanding. Because every heartbreak, every failure, every silence shaped you into the person you are now. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You've made the unconscious conscious. You've faced your old patterns, your wounds, your cycles, and now you no longer repeat them unconsciously. That's not just healing, that's awakening. When the past loses its hold on your emotions, when nostalgia doesn't hurt anymore, you're not the same person who once cried over it. And that's the most undeniable proof that you've healed. Sign 4. Your solitude no longer feels lonely. There was a time when silence was unbearable. You filled it with noise, company, distraction, anything to escape yourself. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, you began to find peace in the quiet. Now, being alone doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like home, because you've met the parts of yourself you used to avoid, the ones carrying shame, regret, and longing. And instead of silencing them, you've learned to sit with them, to listen, to forgive, to hold them with compassion. Jung taught that wholeness doesn't come from rejecting our shadows, but from embracing them. Solitude became your sacred mirror, a place where you met your shadow and didn't flinch. You've healed more than you realize when your own company feels safe, when you can spend hours in stillness and feel connected instead of abandoned. Because the deepest form of healing is learning that you were never truly alone. You just hadn't met yourself yet. Sign 5. You respond, not react. There was a time when pain triggered you instantly. A harsh word, a cold silence, a small rejection, and suddenly you felt the whole weight of your past pressing on your chest. You reacted because every wound inside you was still raw, still open. But now, something feels different. You pause before responding. You breathe. You notice the emotion without letting it take control. That's healing. That's the soul reclaiming its rhythm. Carl Jung believed that emotional maturity begins when we stop being possessed by our unconscious feelings. The anger, the fear, the jealousy, they no longer run the show. You begin to observe them instead of becoming them. You've healed more than you realize when you can say, I understand why I feel this way, but I will not let it define how I act. That's growth that can't be seen on the surface. It's invisible strength, the kind no one applauds because it happens in silence. Yet that pause between impulse and action is the birthplace of your new life. Healing doesn't mean you never feel hurt again. It means you trust yourself enough to hold that hurt gently. You speak softer, you think slower, you forgive faster. That's not weakness, that's evolution. And when you start living from response rather than reaction, you begin to move through the world with peace instead of fear. That is the proof of deep psychological integration. Exactly what Jung meant when he said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are listening to yourself. Sign 6. You begin to create instead of escape. Once, every moment of pain sent you searching for escape, through distraction, entertainment, people, anything to drown out the noise within. But healing slowly turned your pain into a teacher. Instead of running from your emotions, you began expressing them through words, art, music, silence, or prayer. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole through self-expression. When the soul stops hiding behind masks and begins to translate its suffering into creation, that's when true transformation begins. You've healed more than you realize when your pain no longer consumes you. It inspires you. You write about it. You build from it. You speak from it. You help others carry theirs because you know what it felt like to carry yours alone. You start turning chaos into meaning. And that is the highest form of healing. When life's sharpest edges become tools in your hands. So if you find yourself creating beauty from your pain, don't dismiss it as coincidence. It's your unconscious finding language. It's your inner child finally speaking without fear. A quiet realization, maybe no one noticed. Maybe there was no celebration, no moment where someone said, "You've changed." But you did. You changed in the way you breathe before speaking, in the way you choose peace over proving your point, in the way you sleep without replaying the same story every night, in the way you stopped waiting for someone to save you. You became your own healer, and you did it without applause. Jung believed that every person carries within them a self that is always trying to heal, always trying to bring balance. You don't have to chase it. You just have to stop resisting it. Healing is not linear. It's a spiral. Sometimes you revisit old pain only to find that it doesn't break you anymore. It just reminds you how far you've come. And one day you'll look at yourself and realize you no longer crave the things that once poisoned you. You no longer feel drawn to the chaos that once defined you. You are no longer fighting for peace. You are peace. That's when you'll know you've healed more than you ever imagined. There's a quiet moment that no one sees, the exact second when pain stops being your enemy and becomes your teacher. You don't realize it at first. It happens in small ways. You walk through the same places that once made you cry, and somehow you feel calm. You see people who once hurt you, and your chest doesn't tighten anymore. That's not indifference. That's transformation. That's the soul shedding its old skin. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And maybe that's what you've been doing. Not escaping the darkness, but learning to sit with it until it's softened. Healing isn't glamorous. It's messy. It's nights of questioning everything you thought you were. It's the silence after heartbreak where you finally hear your own heartbeat again. But through that silence, you learn something extraordinary, that you are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after it. The freedom you didn't notice. Healing rarely announces itself. It's not a loud breakthrough. It's quiet mornings that feel lighter than before. It's realizing you no longer check their profile. It's smiling again, without pretending. It's forgiving someone, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. When you've healed more than you realize, you stop craving chaos. You stop chasing closure from people who aren't capable of giving it. You stop replaying conversations that never had answers. You start loving the calm. You start trusting the stillness. The world used to feel like a battlefield. Every emotion, a weapon. Every silence, a wound. But now you walk differently. You move through life with grace instead of defense. This is what Jung meant when he said that every individual must integrate their shadow. The shadow isn't just the dark parts of you. It's the rejected parts of your soul waiting to be understood. When you finally accept that darkness, you stop being at war with yourself. You realize there was never an enemy, only pain that wanted to be seen. You begin to love gently. Healed people love differently. They no longer cling. They no longer beg to be chosen. They give love freely because they no longer see it as something they must earn. You've healed more than you realize when your love becomes calm, not desperate. When you can say no without guilt. When you can walk away without bitterness. Because now you understand. Love isn't meant to rescue you. It's meant to reflect you. And when you start to love without losing yourself, that's when healing becomes wisdom. You no longer need someone to fill your emptiness because you've built a home within yourself. You recognize the patterns you've outgrown. Another sign you've healed more than you realize is when your old patterns start to feel foreign. You no longer find comfort in chaos. You no longer confuse anxiety with excitement. You no longer chase people who withhold affection because you finally believe you deserve peace. You begin to notice the patterns in others too, not to judge them, but to protect your energy. You start understanding that everyone's acting from their own wounds. And so, instead of reacting, you respond with understanding. That is emotional intelligence in its purest form, born from suffering, sculpted by reflection. Healing is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming conscious, and consciousness brings freedom. My friends, you don't need a sign that you've healed. This, your peace, your clarity, your calm, is the sign. You've walked through the fire and didn't lose your soul. You've faced yourself and didn't turn away. You've fallen apart and still found the courage to rebuild, quietly, beautifully, in your own time. So when you doubt your progress, remember this. Healing doesn't erase the past. It transforms your relationship with it. You no longer need the pain to define you. You no longer need to keep proving that you survived, because you did. And now, you're not just surviving. You're becoming. You're growing into someone who doesn't need the storm to feel alive. You are peace now. You are the light Jung spoke of. Not because you chased it, but because you became it.